seriously, like, that was one of the worst wrong forecasts I've run into in quite some time. I mean, looking at it, I think it timed out right. Like, that's part of why I was so excited to go in the first place, that, like, the crappy wind that we ended up getting was literally supposed to be leaving around the time I was planning on leaving for the night. So I was looking at it as like, hey, there's my cap to go home.
Yeah, it was supposed to start so much later, and
Yeah.
I don't know, Toby. I don't know if I missed it, but it was so much stronger wind than I thought it was supposed to be.
It was, I mean, early on, like when we were fishing, certainly, you know, when we were out there, I don't even think it was supposed to be as strong as it actually was. I mean, you know, I got there a little while before you did, and those first couple of casts, the first 10, 15 minutes, I was like, this is what it's supposed to be. You know, that light wind, even if it had come across the different direction, it wouldn't have been a problem. But then right around, I mean, it was like you brought the wind with you.
Yeah.
It was just screaming down the beach. I mean, there's ways to deal with that crosswind. We can talk about that one time, but at some point, but I wasn't ready for it last night. I was not ready to have that kind of crosswind to that severity, that consistent, the gusts that came with it. And I mean, really the only thing I think that made me keep going with it, maybe because of those conditions, like the water looked so good. It was baffling that there was nothing there.
Yeah, the water did look good. We definitely had a good surf. I mean, talk about not being prepared. I show up with my fly rod. And that's how unprepared I was.
When I saw you walk up with that, I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
I know. Your first thing you say to me is, you just brought the fly rod? That's what you said. But that's how clueless I was. I mean, that's kind of how the season, and of course we'll get to this in our monthly wrap up, but that's what happens sometimes when the season isn't going so well. You stop paying so close attention, and you're just like, well, I'm going to go, and, you know, it'll be what it is, you know? The thing is, again, when I looked at the weather, I mean, the wind, it was supposed to be whatever, 10 knots or whatever. It was sustained. Tops. Yeah, it was sustained 18, gusting to 26.
Yeah. And in a crosswind. When it was supposed to be at your back.
Like, we couldn't even talk. Oh my God, it's so wild.
Yeah, that was frustrating. And, you know, like I said, when we were talking about it after, like, it was also one of those cases where, because it looked so good, I kept thinking it was about to happen. So, like, that's in the forefront of my mind. I'm thinking, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, that next cast. In the back of my mind, like, the rational side was like, dude, it hasn't happened yet. It ain't going to happen in the next 5 minutes. Why are you still here?
Yeah, but do you put a lot of stock in that, though? I mean, I feel like that's probably pretty important to you, right? If you feel it's good, that probably means something. Don't you think?
You know,
maybe not.
Like, yes and no.
Okay.
Depends. It's not enough. It's like it hasn't happened enough to make me 100% buy into it, but it's happened enough to make me buy into it.
Yeah,
like it's that double-edged sword that hell, even if it's 50-50, like that's exactly it, that it could or it couldn't. So just in case it could, I mean, hell, even if it was 5%, it could. I'd still be trying to lean on that because maybe this is that 5%. So
yeah, I think when it feels good and I'm like, oh, it's really fishy, I think it gives me permission to stay longer or try more stuff. And I think that alone is important. It's almost like, you know, in the medical community, the placebo effect, for people who don't know what that is like, you're taking a medicine that you think is doing something. It's not actually doing anything, but because you think it's doing something, it does something. And actually, in the scientific literature and in medical community, the placebo effect is very real and it's very powerful. It helps with cancer treatment. It helps with heart disease. It helps with crazy, you know, psychiatric stuff. It really helps with real medical conditions. I think that feeling of like, ooh, tonight is right. Ooh, it feels good. Even if it's a little bit placebo, if it keeps me out there, I'm okay with it. You know what I mean? So it's almost like you have to just kind of buy into the delusion a little bit and just go with it. You know what I mean? So the next time it feels good, just go with the delusion.
Yeah, it's like you said, it certainly helps you to like stick those nights longer. You know, because
yes,
I mean, last night if it was if it was that wind and that incorrect of a forecast, but it didn't look so good, I mean, that'd have been like 5 minutes, 5 casts, peace, I'm out, see you tomorrow.
You know, the other thing that happened last night too was the weeds. I mean, that's the thing. I think if we had had just the wind, I would have even been more. But then we had the weeds. Talk about a nightmare with the fly rod. Oh my God.
And to make it not so, we didn't have the weeds, and then the weeds moved in.
Yes.
But then the weeds kind of like subsided and made it better. So it was like it screwed you, but then it screwed you by kind of making it easier to fish. But then there wasn't anything. It's giving you that false hope. I mean, there was a lot of like just messing with your mind emotions going last night.
Yeah, and then we're like trying to decide what we're gonna do, and you're like leaning on the car, and I'm looking at your body language, and I'm like, well, he's done.
But I wanted, like, then that was where it looked so damn good. There should be something side was coming in. Like, there's probably some fish, and maybe they're just like, a couple times you said maybe they're right around the corner, or maybe they're at that spot versus this spot where we are.
And that's the thing, when it feels good like that, it makes you want to go just a little bit more, because it probably could be. But man, with the way the fishery is, it's becoming less likely that that's true. There isn't that one more corner, that one more bowl, that one more turn, that whatever. It just doesn't seem to happen as much. So what an uplifting conversation we're having, Toby. What a wonderful. This must be so motivating for everyone to listen to. They must be really enjoying it. It's so uplifting.
Yeah, but it's going to run nicely into what our theme of this episode is today. So hopefully that will bring it up and around and put it on a positive note. And that's, I mean, you've got the topic a little hammered down a little better. So I'm going to let you actually announce the specifics today.
Yeah, sure. Unlike some weeks where we don't actually plan the lead in, we knew that this was going to lead into this really well. So it all just kind of worked out. So the thing I was thinking about the other night was I fished one of my spots that I love so much under perfect conditions 2 nights in a row, and it basically produced nothing. And it just got me thinking, what if this was the first 2 nights I'd ever been to the spot? Like, what if this was the only times I'd ever been here? I'd be like, well, this spot is shit. It's garbage. Like, this is obviously not going to work. Look at how fishy this looks, and there's no fish here. And maybe then I would have moved on to another spot, or I wouldn't have fished it, or it would take me years to come back. And it just got me thinking about, how many nights, this is the question, this is the focus of the episode, how many nights in a row do you fish a spot when it's not producing, when it's not good, but when you are learning, when you're searching, when the season's good, when you know a spot's good? Those are all kinds of different things. But basically the question is, and I'm going to phrase it to you first, Toby, I'll let you go with it a little bit, is if you have a spot you know well, let's just start there. How many nights in a row do you fish it before you say, all right, I got to move on to another one? If the pattern is right.
I was thinking about it when you kind of like pitch this, and there's like my gut response. Then I actually thought about it a bit more because it's I had to think about it in regard to not necessarily where I am right here today, meaning like I'm busy, stuff's going on, I got work, I got kid stuff going, things like that. When I'm actually able to, let's say I had no distractions,
no obligations.
No complications to getting out when I want, which has happened at different times in my life. It's roughly 3 days. 3 days, and it is, I think, where I would put it, because like you said, you could just hit it on off. So 1 is not enough to tell by any means, whether it's good or bad. Night 1 is what it is, whatever. If night 1's bad, okay, night 2, you're starting to see a little pattern develop. Like, let's say that it's in the negative. I'll give it that second night. The third night, I mean, I would do the third night if, again, like you said, conditions are right, meaning the variables are there that match success in that spot in the past, whether it's, whatever pieces, however many I want to put together, enough to continue to say, this is my best choice for tonight. So if, A, B, and C come together and it's spot 7 for that window, I'm going to give it those 3 nights. Yeah. But it's also the little flip side too on that is, that's around, because I was thinking about it some more, that's around the number of tides and nights, 6 consecutive nights when I've been on a good bite that I can push it. They're kind of similar. So I'll usually, if I'm on a good bite, I'll push it longer than that, but it's like 3 nights is sort of the best window of a good bite that I can manage. So it's kind of interesting that as I thought the answer through and where I've gone, that number roughly kept coming up. And I was thinking of specifics. I wasn't just like, oh, random number. 3 sounds about right. No, I was really thinking through some occasions where it happened and checked some logbook stuff. And that's round where I came with. I mean, is that similar to where you're at?
Yeah. So before I forget, having a good bite for more than 3 nights, I think, is pretty rare. I mean, it's happened for me. I've had 6, very consistent, good, but like 3 really consistent good nights is more than that. Is also pretty rare. It's hard to hold together a perfect set of conditions for that whole time too. Everything from the wind and the temperature to the tide height and bait pattern. It's hard to hold all that stuff together perfectly for that period of time.
3 good nights for me. The first night's always the best of a good bite, and it's always a step down in each one, regardless of which way like things are developing, whether it's the moon, air quote, improving or wind improving. There's just a tendency I've seen. It depreciates the value.
That's
an interesting first bite.
There's some
that one.
Yeah.
Like even Jay and I have talked about it a few times. Like when we do really good, like the Go Tight days, it was so hard. It was always like that night one. When we'd hit it, that was the peak. There was occasional where maybe night 2 was, but never the third night. It never ramped up. It was like the number of times we said, "What if we'd have come out one day sooner to this bite or this tide like thing? What if?" And it was never. We never felt like we hit it.
There's definitely something to unpack there. I mean, I'm a big believer in the bookends tides. I wrote an article about that for On the Water like 4 years ago or something. I don't remember, maybe 5. And the idea that like the first time you can get into a pattern on a bite, those fish have probably also been waiting. I'm air quoting. It's their first opportunity to get into whatever that pattern is, which the whole reason they're there is because they have some kind of ultimate advantage. So they also want to be there. And so there's something about that first bit, the first time it can be after dark, the first time it lines up with the wind, the first time the bait's there, whatever that first is, can be really good. And I found that the last as well, the very last time that you can get into that spot can be as good as well. That's more rare for me though. I'm more the believer at the beginning. But going back to your question, I also think 3 nights, but I'm often a lot of times a 4-night person. I love to say multiple. I love all kinds of quotes and stuff. I like little quibs and wordy things. So, there's a very famous military quote that 2 is 1 and 1 is none is the quote. And I really believe that 1 night means nothing. If you have a bad night, don't worry. 1 bad night means nothing. Because the night before there could have been a pile of 50s, and the next 5 nights there could be a pile of 50s. Because in the surf fishing, we just don't have that level of resolution where we know that. It just changes too much. At least for me, and I know for you too. Even as, as highly skilled an angler as you are. The 1 night means nothing. Again, 2 nights starts to feel like, okay, maybe there's something going on, but you can connect. This is the other one. You can connect a straight line between any 2 points. That's the other one I want to say. So again, 2 points do not make a trend. So we still don't know after 2 nights. So after 3 nights, I start to feel like, okay, I've got a handle on what's going on. The reason I usually do 4 nights if I've had 3 bad nights is because I've usually modify something. So a lot of my spots I can change a little bit of something. My approach, maybe there's multiple patterns. Maybe what I'll do is it'll be 5 nights total and I'll do 4 of the 5 nights, which is a little bit cheating, I realize. But like I'll do 2 nights and nothing changes. I'll take a break, I'll go somewhere else, and then I'll do 2 more nights. That kind of thing. And I've done that. That scenario I just outlined is one I use a lot when I have a really good pattern, I have a really good spot. I'll know, okay, the night is this long and I've got this many nights, 5 nights, 6 nights, 8 nights, whatever it is. And then I'll go, okay, I'm going to do the first 1 or 2. Okay, it's not working. I'm going to go take my fly rod and screw around somewhere, or I'm going to go, run way out onto the sand beaches, or I'm going to, do something else. And then, okay, I'm going to come back now. Maybe I'll do it 1 more night. Maybe I'll do it 2 more nights. Maybe something's changed a little bit, and I'll give it 3 nights. And I do that a lot. But I really think it's important for people listening who are newer, who don't fish very much to not do staccato, not one spot, one spot, one spot, one spot, one spot, and ba 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 ba. Now, if it's the fall time and you're running the coast of Maine or you're running the coast of South County, Rhode Island in one night, that's different because you're doing a whole bunch of stuff on one night. But if you go to one spot and you fish it for 3 hours, and then the next day you go to another night, fish for 3 hours, I think that's a mistake. Yes? Agreed?
Yeah. I do very little jumping like that with my spots. I kind of commit to windows of if the conditions are right. Because like I said before, if A, B, and C best say go to spot 7, that's where I'm putting on that one. The only reason I would jump off of it, like let's say I went night 1 and it tanked, there would have to be something like massive amount of weeds in the water, like some variable that's not going to change in a 24-hour tide cycle. That's what's going to push me to jump elsewhere. But then when I jump to that, like, the secondary spot, now I'm locked in that one for the winter.
Yes.
I'm not going to jump to spot 3 unless spot 2 was also a mess.
Yes.
I probably wouldn't go to a third after that. I'd probably say, you know what, I need a 2-day window off now.
Yes, I agree. I think that this is why understanding your portfolio of spots and understanding the hierarchy given the conditions that you're handed, and say, okay, I've got A spot, B spot, maybe, hopefully C spot, or D or whatever. And I'm going to fish A, but after 2 nights or 3 nights of A, I got to make sure I don't go a 4th night. I'm going to go to B because B could be good, or maybe I'm going to do 2 nights. And if that doesn't work, then I'll go to the B spot and try it once, and maybe C, and okay, no, nothing. Well, 1 night doesn't mean anything, but I'm going to go back to the A, so now I'm back to 3 nights there. You know what I mean? Doing that kind of thing, but doing it methodically, not just bouncing around randomly looking for fish that you hope are going to be there. You're not fishing a pattern. You're just showing up at a spot that you think is good, or know is good, or heard is good, or read a report, or whatever, or caught a fish there once 10 years ago.
Yeah,
it's more.
You're not working something you could replicate. It might get you. Maybe you'll stumble upon a fish, but it's nothing of consequence that you're ever going to be able to use in likelihood down the road.
Yeah, even if it's huge. I mean, even if you get a couple of really big fish, if you get some big fish, well, then now try to figure out what the pattern is.
Yeah.
And even more reason to stay there, But this is the thing. I mean, guys are quick to declare a pattern, and, after 1 set of tides or, 2 months, and it takes a lot longer than that. And you don't want to be abandoning a spot if you feel it's good or you've had success just because it doesn't work the next time. Like, you can keep going. Like, you should keep trying, because again, it almost now I'm getting off topic a little bit, but it almost is the same thing about moon. I'm not going to fish 1 moon and declare, okay, I'm not going to fish the spot again this season. It's not any good. Every moon, I'm going to keep going back when the pattern's right, if I believe in the spot. Even more so if I'm learning. Even more so if I'm learning. How do you feel about that?
Oh, yeah, certainly, like with the moon on it. I mean, I've got my preferred moons. Like, I have one spot that is not penciled in. It is like in Sharpie that this is not a full moon spot. But I still try it on this bright a couple times every year. Like, I continue to still, I probably defeat it before I get there, saying it's not gonna happen, but I push through and say, one of these times maybe I'll figure that thing out with it, with the moon. Let's unlock the moon on that spot, because that one place baffles me with why it could be so good in the day when it's bright as could be, but then at night, if it's bright, it's not. I wrote about that in SJ. That's still my Achilles heel, is the damn bright moon in certain scenarios.
Yeah, it's really brutal. I think, listening to you talk and us talking about this too, I want to raise this almost hypocritical point, though. And that's that I have spots that I really believe in that I will fish 6 nights in a row and not get a single hit, and still totally believe that the next one could be a 50-pound fish or 40-pound fish, or all of a sudden that day I could show up and there could be 12 30-pounders. Like, there's spots I have like that. There are spots I will couch and say that after a trip or 2 of the right, perfect, I'm putting quotes, conditions, I'm probably going to bail. I'm probably going to be more likely to not come back, because they're so much more consistent when things are good. And if it's not, the fish aren't there when it's good, they're not going to suddenly show up 3 days later. Like, it's just not going to happen. Do you have any feelings about that, Toby? Does that make
No,
sense?
certainly. Like when you said it there, they're not going to suddenly show up when it's perfect. Let's say you had 3 perfect condition nights, and like night 1 and 2 were nothing. Likelihood they're not going to come in a third. But like the other side of it, I've had happen is if continuing with that 3-night theme of perfect, if night 1 and night 2 are perfect, I've had night 3 and night 4 still the same exact perfect and nothing. Like,
Nothing.
It could crap out there.
Yep, exactly.
The perfect the failure on a perfect condition always seems to go downhill. It never comes back. Like, it never redeems itself, for me at least.
Yes, exactly. The other thing I will say is I have heard from other anglers. There's been other people I fish with, but there's one person in particular I fish with, and if there's no fish after 2 or 3 days, his is no fish this moon. There's no fish this moon. They're gone. There's none. And it doesn't matter what happens with the conditions. I mean, granted, one of the spots is very tide driven, but it's also there's all kinds of other factors. And I always want to take him and be like, shake him and be like, we've only fished 2 days. He's like, one more night, and if it's not, there's no fish this moon. There's just nothing. We'll just wait till next time. I'm like, you don't know that though. You don't know. And I think it's really important to keep that perspective of it can change at any moment. It's not these 2-week, 3-week windows. No matter what. I don't believe that at all. So, I mean, I do believe that there can be no fish for 3 weeks for sure, but it isn't like, I'm doing a bad job of explaining this. It's not like, there was fish here for 3 or 4 days this moon, and then there won't be any fish for 3 weeks now, or 2 weeks, or whatever, until the next tide stage. It could be any time within there, if there were other patterns you had they could make work. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So, it just bothers me when, after 2 or 3 nights, it's declared no fish this moon. That bothers me.
Yeah.
That bothers me.
Yeah, it's that's when I started saying, I was like, that's when I start really thinking of the where are they. But I don't go on the hunt terribly far. I'm quicker to take. I've probably done more where if I've got, let's say, I've pieced together 3 bad nights, I will take 1, probably 2 nights off, but then I'll go right back to that same spot that just tanked.
Yes.
Because then it'll almost be like I'm taking it personal.
Yeah, right.
Like, I know this spot. I know they should be here in this window. Now, granted, if that's the time sequence of 3 days of fishing it and then 2 days off, now you're half a moon different. So, like, I've got places that can consistently produce in the, like in that stretch. That, like, it's really personal. I take a lot of those little, like, when I'm wrong with it and I'm getting outsmarted by these little pea-brained fish, it gets personal. I'm like, I gotta go back and I'm gonna prove that you guys are here, that you're gonna come through, and all. I've put too much time then, consecutive like sessions of spurts of bad results. But my buddy Pete always, like, I love talking to my buddy Pete when I'm doing poorly, because he always reminds me that it's like the worse it gets, the reward when it comes around is just so much better. It pays off. It's like the more you suffer, the better the reward in the end. Not necessarily meaning like a bigger fish, but once you finally get it to happen, it's so much more rewarding and fulfilling that I stuck it out. I stuck to my guns. I worked through this. I figured it out. Maybe you didn't so much figure it out as the fish just came back in, but you could, make yourself feel better.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, so many nights I've had that just running through my mind. I hear his voice in the back of my head, dude, when it pays off, it's going to pay off big.
And I think, I was listening to Bill Wetzel, a part of one of his midnight rantings on Instagram, and he was talking about vigilance and having like perpetual vigilance. And I do, as much as I hate to admit it, because it doesn't always work out, I do think having a sense of constant optimism and like, it could be tonight, this could be it, things to change, and kind of having that mentality, as cynical and pessimistic as you and I can be sometimes, Toby, I think you have to have that when you've had 2 or 3 nights bad, because that 4th night could be the one. And in fact, if you're listening to this right now and you need a motivation to fish, that should be your motivation, because I really believe that at my core of my soul, just because the last 3 nights have been bad or 4 nights have been bad, if you have a spot that's good and the pattern is good and you believe in it, then fish it until it's gone, until it's gone. This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.